And it's the 22nd day of October 2024. We'll come back for more. A funny thing happened on the way to sanity. We discovered that almost all nuclear power plants were surrounded by farms, which kind of brings us to our poll tonight. Does the nuclear industry build all nuclear power plants and dumps in prime farming zones to destroy health worldwide? Because you're talking about 400 nuclear power plants, for instance, just as many dumps, and they're all built in prime farmland. So that's quite the coincidence, isn't it? If it was a coincidence. But it's not a coincidence, is it? Just bear with me here. I've been out in the shed all day again. Burnt out. Undernourished and burnt out. We got 132 views on the video last night. That was pretty amazing. We had a show like that last week. Just these are the best shows, and they get the least amount of views. Pretty interesting. 130 views on a show I've been doing for a decade. I gotta try this again, have I? There we go again. It worked that time. Sellafield is a good example because we have a satellite picture. Oh, on the wrong screen here. So Sellafield, which is right here, United Kingdom, that's over 1,000 buildings right there. It's a massive site. It's the reprocessing site, but it's typical of nuclear sites. And these are satellite pictures, so it's hard to appreciate how big that site actually is. And this is a satellite picture, of course. When you look at the farmland, then because all the fuel is hemorrhaging radiation, there's no containment, so it's still splitting atoms. So instead of splitting atoms in a containment for 1 million homes and businesses each day, each minute, it's still splitting the same atoms and there's no containment. Everything is vented. It's the dirtiest secret of nuclear. And so that's why we got a poll asking a simple question. Does the nuclear industry build all nuclear plants in prime farming zones to destroy the health of everybody worldwide that goes to supermarkets, for instance, or Walmart, or any major food distribution agencies are getting this food from this coordinated attack upon humanity? And eating this food right away can lead to incredible diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Government agency is funding projects to monitor online information about Fukushima. Around-the-clock monitoring of blogs on nuclear power. So we talk about nuclear power around the clock. They're monitoring us around the clock. That's why you get 132 views on the video. They got nobody else to pick on. There is nobody else doing what we do on the entire planet. And there's no one ever done this, come out with an educational program on the entire planet. Yeah, there's lots of activists and organizations that are so-called anti-nuclear. And none of them are writing educational programs. How bizarre is that? So here we are, October 22nd, 2024. We're talking about nuclear, but we got a poll tonight asking an important question. Does the nuclear industry build all nuclear power plants in prime farming zones? And it's the same thing with their dumps, by the way. And fresh water. They love poisoning the fresh water. Many spots 15 kilometers out have higher radiation than at the Fukushima front gate. Fukushima was multiple reactors and fuel pools that lost their entire inventories, lost all their fuel in particulates. Risk minimal, day in no-go zones like 12-hour plane ride. That's the Washington Post. Can you imagine equating anthropogenic man-made, like a dirty bomb, with flying on a plane? They won't do that one, will they? It's the same radiation. The whole industry has already jeopardized the future of humanity and the species through the radioactive fallout. And so this study here is true, applicable for the entire planet, not just Fukushima. And so this is how you slowly start to unpack the horror of the nuclear industry. X-ray-like images show radioactive contamination spread through the leaves and the grass collected from Fukushima to Tokyo, 240 kilometers away. So you can actually quantify it with X-rays. And you've seen the same thing in animals, by the way, right? Completely contaminated. Fukushima fallout at the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo was 225,000 atoms a square meter, far in excess of a limit set for radiation-controlled zones. So Tokyo clearly should have been evacuated, and everything in between, obviously, right? Fukushima and Tokyo. 30, 40 million people. And Tokyo, of course, has 36 million, so when you start stacking the numbers up. Japan's radiation expert after 3/11, don't just leave Tokyo. Right, there was people speaking out, and there is enough information now of the time from the time machine, which is, the most important headlines are the original headlines. If you're going to look at an event in history, you don't look for, or if you're going to do any kind of in-depth look at it, you're going to look for the original material, right? And the reason being is because the story gets lost in translation far down the road, and propaganda and public relation firms. So leave the country if possible. Journalists, I'm losing my words. So leave the country was an appropriate response, by the way. Bear with me. Disease outbreak on the U.S. West Coast due to Fukushima fallout. Disease outbreak on the continental coastline of North America / the U.S. West Coast is the continental coast. Is the largest ever seen in any population of animals, and tens of millions dead. And the government needs to declare an emergency for an extinction occurs. And many scientists believe radiation from Fukushima was to blame. 2015. Massive die-off of sea creatures from California to Alaska. And we're going to get to the farm stuff here in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Mass starvation event plagues the West Coast. I felt like I was doing nothing but counting dead animals. Deaths are really quite troubling. 2017, now I was actually on the ocean doing research expeditions, and as far as I know, I'm the only person that was reporting the information. The media was out telling you that it was like flying on an airplane. I was bringing you the real information of an extinction event that still haunts me today. Japan prince's son, no one died. No one got injured from Fukushima. No one. No one is worried about radiation. And the media's job is to sell you the craziest story on the planet. And Gunnarsson done that to you too, didn't they? Move south of the equator if Unit 4 pool goes dry. Well, here's Unit 4. I don't know if the fuel pool was at the very top of the building, but these medias, just a fraction of them, are pretending they're at the top of the building. Why would you take a chance on that? All the producers and video editors and photographers, all the Salians and stagehands, all had to participate in that lie. All the other media worldwide had to participate for that lie to work, and all universities had to participate in that lie for this lie, for the media to come out, because it's pretty easy for anybody, including me and you, to say, well, that's Reactor 4 in 2013. This is the media saying they're in the fuel pool at the top of the building that doesn't exist in 2013. And so, gotcha, you're lying, that's the end of you. And the only way so they can come out and be brave enough to do this is if all your media, all your universities have signed a pact with the devil to destroy you, to betray you. I'm not kidding you. There's zero possibilities that these people don't know they're not in that building. There's zero possibilities whoever's taking the video camera knows they're not in that building. And there's zero possibilities the editor, the producers, the CEOs of these CBS and BBC and CNN and ABC Australia and the many, many, many other medias worldwide that perpetrated this hoax. This is 100% hoax. The building doesn't even exist, yet they're pretending they're in a building. And there's 70 of these reactors in the United States. And there's a lot of people that were really popular on E&E News, for instance, used to come into my comments section saying, well, they're probably at the Downey plant, right? But there's 70 of these exact replicas in the United States. Reactors, exact models, exactly right down to the T, right down to the plugs in the wall. Everything's exactly replicas. Scientists revealed details of unprecedented mass mortality on the West Coast to begin the summer of 2011. Millions of deaths before the sea stars wasting syndrome, which was never quantified. And I had went down and interviewed the dean of the university in Banfield, which was sponsored by 70 universities. It was a marine research university. And I went down and confronted them, and they had the video taken down. Then I got to put back up again. And when I went down there again the next year, they threatened to arrest me as soon as they saw me. It's illegal to question them, right? Mortality rates of 99% over a large region. No documented event has been so severe. And I was actually out doing the research, species counts. And the media was cutting your throat. Cutting up your throat, boys. Japan Times column 2011. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, truth will come out about Fukushima. Now the Japan Times column says there is no meltdown. Hard cases. Fukushima worker warns, get out of Japan before spring. Radioactive pollen is very serious. And so we have the headlines of the radioactive pollen. I can't remember the numbers, 4,000 chems per minute or something, cubic meter of air. Radioactive pollen. You're wondering where all the bees have gone, eh? The media, man, they have really screwed us. We may not be able to live in Japan someday. That's probably the most accurate statement imaginable. They shouldn't be there now. Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. The entire nuclear core and the fuel pools were ejected into the environment. Officially, none of this happened. Officially, they got all the fuel out of the fuel pools, and now they're going to the reactors. But clearly, when you see these explosions and you see what's left of the buildings, and that was Reactor 3 explosion. This is day 6 over there, look. There's nothing left. And today, the official story, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear regulatory agencies, is that they got all the fuel out of the pool 140 feet above the stump of this plutonium mixed oxide reactor. This is the worst kind of a reactor. Like, in all the types of meltdowns you can have, this is the worst reactor to melt down, is the Reactor 3. And at the top of it was 4 decades of reactor cores in pools, because it doesn't have a repository in Japan or anywhere else on the planet. This was the original footage. Those two in particular, there was 4 of these reactors that lost their fuel pools and reactor cores. But these two are clearly, you don't need an engineering degree or to be an architect or engineer to understand the buildings are gone and completely destroyed. And it's hard to appreciate how big these buildings are. They're 150 by 150 by 190 feet tall, 65 meters, 19-story tall buildings. So you can see a person stood up there. Hopefully, I guess that's the bottom part. That part there is taller than either one of these buildings. So that piece there is actually taller than them. And there's 4, this is going to be a cover for Reactor 1, a Kevlar cover, Kevlar sarcophagus, so to speak. They took down 5 years later. The idea was to stop pictures from leaking out. Every organism in the Fukushima prefecture is contaminated with radiation. 60 kilometers from the meltdown was 1.4 million atoms per kilogram detected in the worm's feces 60 kilometers from the meltdown. And what that means, of course, is that the air is completely saturated in the water. Not maybe, not perhaps. And what we're talking about here, by the way, is only gamma, and just one type of gamma. So we're not talking about alphas and betas and neutrons or X-rays. Conveniently, that has been left completely out of the picture the entire 13 years. Japan times okay for babies to drink radioactive milk because adults have natural potassium. So they've told a lie so many times they believe their own lies, because potassium 40 is 71 10 millionths of a Curie. Let me bring it up for you, actually. I probably got it wrong. But it's actually really important, this video, this first part of the video in particular, and what we're about to cover right after this one. The farms, which is why we have a poll tonight. 71 10 millionths of a Curie per gram. Okay, so a Curie is 37 billion atomic decays a second. So 37 billion times cesium has 88 Curie. So it's 88 times 37 billion disintegrations per second that are man-made. Potassium is 71 10 millionths of a Curie per gram. So you couldn't make a dirty bomb with that. You couldn't make fuel for a nuclear reactor with potassium because it doesn't have the fission properties. And you're acclimated to it like everything else on the planet through genetic superior selection. Your body regulates the potassium's homeostasis. So what happens is it regulates your body the same as a car cruise control regulates the speed of a car, or a thermostat regulates the temperature of your house. Your body does it totally automatic. And potassium is everywhere. It's in my clothing. It's in the microphone. It's. There's nothing on this planet that doesn't have potassium in it. We're acclimated to it already through genetic superior selection. It's not supposed to be in this equation at all. And they do that to mud the water, and they've been doing it for 80 years. And most of the population now is just acquiescing to everything this industry regurgitates, which is pure propaganda, every single sentence, without exceptions. And by the way, for every cesium-137, there's 10 times or 100 times more strontium-90 produced after the first 1,000 days. And that ratio is true for tens of thousands of days. So when they conflate it, it's okay for babies to drink anthropogenic man-made radioactive milk because adults have natural potassium 40, which is not radioactive. And is so benign and innocuous and harmless that it's only equal to 71 10 millionths of a curie. It's not in the traditional sense. It's not. You can't conflate it with man-made stuff. It's a totally different element. It's natural. It comes from the solar system, unlike the anthropogenic man-made elements. They come from. Let's get going here. Okay, so why? And let's come back over to the poll. Why is? I'm so burnt out. It's not funny. 2 days out in the shed, but I've got 3 counters now clear in the shed for work, for projects, and I got the drill press, the grinder, the cut-off tools, and the other normal stuff all mounted on a different setup now. So everything is open. I lined all my tools, made sure all the tools in the socket sets were all in their right places. So I'm trying to get busy. You can't do the work because I've done so much work. Everything was everywhere. It was just a big bloody nightmare. So 12 hours work or something over 2 days kind of got the better of me. My apologies for the night. Does the nuclear industry build all nuclear plants in prime farming zones to destroy the health of people worldwide? And so it's quite the coincidence that almost every single nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. That's a pretty good coincidence, isn't it? Just hang on a second. I'm going to turn my audio up just a little tiny bit. Just a little bit louder. Please stay just a little bit. There we go. Apologize for singing. I shouldn't call it singing. That's an insult to singers. All right, here we go. So there's just millions and gazillions of studies showing how food and plants, for instance, uptake radiation. There's just endless studies. All right, and so then the question is, why do almost every single nuclear power plant, why is it built in prime farmland? Child's risk of cancer from radiation it's actually 1,000 times higher than an adult with the same exposures because they're developing, and so they're going to be producing a massive amount of radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones because of the contaminants. And so then the big question is, what's the odd that they built all these nuclear power plants in prime farmland as it was a complete coincidence? And of course, that drinking water is what's feeding those cities, those communities. Radioactive drinking water. These are disease factories. There's no other way to describe a nuclear power plant or a nuclear dump because everything is splitting atoms. There's no containment. You leave it in a reactor for 14 months and then you put it in a fuel pool where it's splitting atoms for decades into the ecosystem. No containment. And this stuff never goes away, so it's bioaccumulating to the biosphere forever. And then when you have these events, this model here is 19.5 days, 468 hours of radioactive fallout, based on venting, not even based on nuclear meltdowns. And so Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. I put that there to remind me to explain to everybody that this has been going on for 80 years. So these plumes have existed for over 80 years, and it never goes away. Every time you add, every day there's 400 massive plumes created, or there's 1,000 from the 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. every single day, 1,000 plumes like that. And there's no other element or no other pollution on the entire planet that produces plumes that covers the entire planet. That pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second and never goes away. They really got it in for us, and we are way behind. We are way down this rabbit hole. And people don't realize how late it is, how far down deep the hole we already are, and it's a long way back to the surface for us. Not just cancer, but heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. So why is almost every nuclear power plant that I can find, when you do aerial shots of these sites, this is what you're seeing, except for a very small fraction of the plants. Almost every dump is the same application, the same attributes. Radiation levels on the U.S. West Coast spike to 1 million times normal to 10 million times. And normal is post the nuclear war. They call it nuclear testing for some reason, but it's the same nuclear weapon, the same radioactive fallout. And this model is based on 8 days. This is Xenon-133. Cesium-137. Sorry. At around 10 million atoms per... Well, the numbers, because it's post-war / nuclear testing. Remember what, like the Soviet Union's biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's going off at the same time. That's a nuclear war. The radioactive fallout is a nuclear war. Just because it wasn't done in anger, don't mean it's not harmful radiation. Cesium-137 levels increase, which pulses energy every 600 feet every second, by the way. And the plume covers the entire planet in 20 days. And the model from this is the French government. And we were showing that last night, but we didn't show it tonight because I'm pretty burnt out. Children with over 11 atoms a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. I know people will say, Dana, well, a Becquerel is not an atom. I know that. I get that. But the Becquerel can't exist without the atom. Right? It's very subtle how brainwashing works. And so if you call it the physical, anthropogenic, man-made atom, then you're more correct than you are by calling it a Becquerel. The Becquerel is the energy. So this is a pulse of energy almost at the speed of light. And so this wrecks chromosomes and DNA and cells and everything with replicating cells. So then the question is, why is every nuclear power plant, except for a few, surrounded by farms as far as you can see? What's the odds of that being an accident? And why do they hate us? Because clearly they must hate us to do something like this to us. When just a single hot particle can cause cancer. And remember, North America, Canada, United States was bombarded, sustained with up to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. So when a single one can cause you lifetime damage, sometimes I'll ask people, are you honest to yourself? Don't worry about me or anybody else in the room. Are you honest to yourself? Do you live in a fantasy? Or do you live in the real world? And if you think you live in the real world and you're not willing to acknowledge what I'm showing you and give it the prominence it deserves, then you're not honest. You're clearly not honest. As the most brutal conversation is nuclear fallout and nuclear problems for all the species, including humans. Like, not being honest is a real big deal. Because I went down this road a very long time ago, 20-something years ago, where I realized that nuclear wasn't good. Because originally I was pro-nuclear for the first couple of years. when I was looking at a lot of nuclear, and I was like, wow, this stuff is amazing. As soon as I went down the rabbit hole, I was like, oh crap, this is a nightmare. It's like 23 years ago now. The influence of development of temperate fruit tree species and the potential for their uptakes of radionuclides. So the best thing about studying plants and radiation is you know the plant's going to suck up the radiation. You know it. You are guaranteed. There's no illusions. It's going to suck up the radiation. So you can go to the universities and apply for funding for a study because you're in proximity of a nuclear plant or nuclear dump or nuclear testing. Now, the idea is not to tell the truth. To do the study and then pretend that it's like potassium or something. We see about 70% of the studies will do that. It's, Canada made it illegal. It's illegal. It's not a crime to say that radiation is like... They actually made it illegal to cover their own arse here. And this is quite scary. A nuclear power plant and then a child's swing or something. So in adults, 50 atoms a kilogram, in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organ. You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you cannot see it. So 50 atoms, how are you going to perceive that? You can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. And then when it's in your food, how do you perceive it in your food? When you go to the supermarket, you assume your food is okay, except for, like pesticides and if it's GMO formaldehydes and everything else. But just say it's just organic. These farmers are growing most likely organic, what they call organic food. They're selling it as organic food. And this is shipped worldwide. Populations they want to poison. And there's many reasons. There might be a lot of mineral deposits in those areas, and they want to get rid of them over the next 50 years, or make them too weak to resist. Before Fukushima, 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium is nuclear waste, and after 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium is safe to eat. So the atom pulses energy, and that's called a Becquerel. But you can't have a Becquerel, which typically could be every second, without the atom. So it's just as well to call a Becquerel an atom as it is to call it a Becquerel, because when you call it a Becquerel, you disconnect those who are trying to learn from appreciating what causes that Becquerel to exist. And that Becquerel is a pulse of energy. And so if, like, iodine 129 with a 15 million year half-life is a pulse of energy every second, almost at the speed of light, that can harm something for 15 million years. It doesn't lose its energy because it has a long life. As some of the trolls had. You'll see them out in the news sites and stuff like that, like the paper media. And you'll see the trolls. It's just those comment sections are just... The whole story is meant to downplay nuclear, then the comments is seeded with the pro-nuclear community. If anybody thinks they can go in there and have a debate, they're insane. Not your fault, but it's controlled opposition, basically. Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans, which how do you suppose they're perceived as, see? Leads to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. And when you got 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air of cesium-137 in a study, it's not just cesium-137, of course, it's in that same plume. Everything is in the plume. Just when you have these ratios, you can extrapolate everything else. So irreversible lesions in the vital organs to adults. And how are you going to avoid that eating food from grown within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant? If that's your supermarket is selling this stuff. And like, it doesn't just fall within a few miles of a nuclear power plant. This stuff will contaminate farms on the other side of the planet too. There's 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging radiation. There's 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging invisible plumes that you can't perceive. You can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it. And let me show you that model from France. So think of the plume coming out of Japan to your left as a snowstorm. And think of how close snowflakes are. It's much worse than that. So I put some depictions here to give you appreciation. This is 10 to 30 million atoms per cubic meter of air. This is what it would look like if you can see. Hang on. So if you could see radiation, when that plume came in, this is what it would look like outdoors. How do you not breathe that in? How did not every pet, how did not every insect, bird, mammal, animal not drink it, ingest it, consume it, breathe it in? And then what happens, right, and think about, this one is a gamma, and this one is an alpha, and this one is a neutron, and that one's a beta. And all of these, they're hitting each other. They don't mix. The alphas, neutrons, betas, and gammas, they don't play good at all. They don't, when they come in contact, they ricochet. So you have two very powerful energies, almost at the speed of light, each hitting their own energy and then changing direction. That's known as a break-in effect. And it's also known, well, we call it an X-ray. So all the species on the entire planet, because that's what that model, and this is, say, that's only day 20 right there, right? That would be day 31. But here, I got the same model without that. So we'll bring that in there. Now, all nuclear power plants are producing these plumes. It might not be those big numbers, but those same plumes. So now the plume model is, but this one here is only based on, my apologies. This is France's government too. This is only based on 15 days right there. And so all of North America, all of Canada, completely buried, according to the French government and everybody else, of course, during the time. Now, nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. So the effects on humans is brutal, but the effects on birds and insects and mammals and animals is catastrophic. So the question is, why is almost every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms as far as you can see when you're in an airplane? Smalley mascot acts as the Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation. This is insanity. They're in a nuclear wasteland, so a mascot is brainwashing the children. They just keep saying it over and over. So these reactors, they're just a couple of buildings. To the average person, they're not able to appreciate that a single building is an extinction event for the whole planet. And Nato Kan, the former Prime Minister of Japan during that time, in his memoirs stated that he almost evacuated half of Japan. If Reactor 4, if this building had have blown up like this here, they would have evacuated half of Japan. And so this is the same building he was talking about. And right alongside of it was Medusa, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, the MOX reactor. So they should have evacuated half of Japan. And 55 countries banned the food from half of Japan for a decade. And so NATO Khan's statement was based upon Reactor 4. So why would you want a nuclear power plant like that anywhere on your planet when it has that particular attribute? It'll contaminate you and everything. There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, see? Your body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of your life, every single atom, and tries to build a tumor around every single atom. So if you know people right now with multiple tumors, that's the Fukushima effect. Irreversible and nuclear industry per se, right? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. Irreversible heart damage. University of Missouri, Columbia. And this was the Japan Times online, by the way. Now they say that there is nothing got out of the plant, only what did was equal to 3 grams of sugar as of August 24, 2023 last year. Sanctioned by the International Atomic Energy Agency / UN. So we're in real trouble, and the world needs people like you to do the moral and ethical thing and gut up and make a... You are Earth's last stand. You're the planet's last stand. You might not understand that, and you might say that's ridiculous and everything else, but you don't realize it, but you are this planet's last stand. And water has brought you here. We all have water in common, right? We're all connected worldwide with everything else. Every species, every human, every animal, every mammal. All 8 million species are connected by water. If we don't have water, then we look like the moon, right? There'd be no species. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. So these numbers, by the way, also means permanent radioactive hormones from the thyroid glands because of the contamination, and permanent radioactive stem cells as they're growing up and developing. And so when you look at all the information, it's clear you got to protect the female because they're 4 times more vulnerable to anthropogenic man-made radiation than the males. And without the females, there's no species. There's no reproduction. Females are born with all their eggs, right? So it's even more important to protect the female population of all species, not just humans, but certainly humans. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farm? That would be a question I would want to ask the nuclear industry if they're on TV. Well, personally, I like to waterboard them a couple of 100 times while I'm asking that question, but that's illegal. That's just... I wouldn't do it. I'm not saying I want to do it. I said, in a fantasy, it'd be a nice social experiment, laboratory setting and everything, right? Just waterboard them a couple of 100 times to see if they change their stories. Translocation of, weed edible parts following contamination. So they know clearly that having farms around nuclear power plants is murder. It's a genocide, right? By the way, cesium doesn't just cause cancer. It immediately damages the heart muscle. You've seen a lot of people dropping dead of heart attacks. Or having heart attacks. And they love to poison the fresh water too. And the salt water. They're unbelievably good at it too. And the plumes, all the models shows the same thing. This is a 20-day plutonium-239 dispersion. Covers the whole plant in the top left-hand corner 20 days, and 21 days up top right-hand corner. Plutonium. Now the numbers are not based. The numbers are not based on the real inventory, right? They're like Reactor 4, for instance, is not in those radioactive fallout numbers at all. The industry is insane. The media, to your right, pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist, is, to me, I don't understand why the world hasn't had this conversation yet. I created that picture, this is a video, this one here.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be Reactor.
On top of UFO. So he's claiming he's 140 feet. All of these does that on top of. When I created that picture, that video, over a decade ago, I got him now, and I'm the only person showing that video. How is that even possible? They're claiming they're up above that red depiction up there, looking down on the pool on top of that building, which doesn't exist. And it's that's 9 nuclear meltdowns in each building, because the fuel pools have around 8 reactor cores. They have around 4 reactor cores. They could have 8 in that one, but at least 4 reactor cores in that one, 4 reactor cores in that one over there, and the running reactor core was 3/4 full. They never take all the fuel out of the reactor unless they're going to. They got some serious repairs to make that they're going to take several years. So 2/3 or 3/4 of the fuel was in the reactor core. And the fuel pools, which had 8 reactor cores, just because they were out of the reactor core don't mean they won't melt down the same as a running reactor core, because they certainly will. Another modeling of cesium-137, scratch out cesium-137, put in plutonium, uranium, americium, plutonium, strontium, or anything else. Vertical soil transfer by a tree root system. So they know, right, putting nuclear power plants in the prime farmland is going to result in genocides. And when all of them worldwide are doing that, why live in denial, I wonder? Nuclear radiologist, don't be fooled by the paid industry consultants. Low doses of ionizing radiation do cause cancers. That was Dr. Peter, I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm sure too many people do it already. Experimentally determined translocations of 134 cesium in potatoes. You like French fries? Well, guess what? If it's grown around, and it probably is, it's probably where McDonald's grow all of their friggin' food to, is around these disease factories. An estimation of the half-life periods of cesium contents in root-inhabited soil layer of meadow ecosystems. So with all of these studies, one has to wonder why, in the name of goodness, would you put all your nuclear power plants in prime farmland? Right, and that's why we got that question. Does the nuclear industry build all nuclear plants in prime farming zones to destroy the health of everybody worldwide? Because if you look at Australia, if you look at France, pretty nasty what they're doing. 70% of all the fresh water goes to the nuclear industry on top of that. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pensioners die every summer because the water is diverted to the nuclear industry, and they're not allowed to use their air conditionings. And the French are really super stupid, because the River Rhine, the river that they're using to cool all these reactors, each reactor needs 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons. All of that water is glacier water. The most pristine water imaginable, and that would run down to the coastline, and before it can get there, the nuclear industry kills it. Beautiful structure of water destroyed. Concerns arising at Fukushima plant, 16,000 workers quit. I'm always pretty impressed that they call them workers, because you'll never find a headline where they're talking about nuclear engineers or nuclear companies or Bechtel or some nuclear company, Toshiba or whatever, working. You'll never see a headline like that. It's always workers. And it's always running out of workers. It's not nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear universities, or anything like that. I have a lot of polls over the years where should nuclear students have to work at Fukushima? That would be great, wouldn't it? Why not put the nuclear students work at the nuclear meltdowns? They can come up with solutions, right? They're not inhibited by propaganda or by peer pressure once they start working. 16,000 workers homeless, the destitute, the victims of society. The immigrants don't speak the language of quit. When you see these plume models, this is the Norwegian Institute for Air Research of Xenon-133. In Washington, it was 450,000 times above detection levels. What was interesting about this particular model was they used purple color. And purple is the color you get when you burn potassium. And so whoever created the model left out a lot and then put in something to subconsciously screw with people that had some kind of higher education, because they knew what the color, subconsciously they learned it in school or university on the periodic tables. When you burn it, it is purple, see? And potassium, of course, is a non-concern. Why would you worry about potassium? Health, but you definitely would worry about xenon-133. And this model was based on April the 5th, right there, 2011. Physicists in the United States worried about inhaling hot particles from Fukushima, either uranium, plutonium, etc. There's 1 million atoms of xenon-133. There's another study of 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter. Another study of the 220 million atoms of iodine-129. And remember this cesium-137 I showed you earlier at 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. So when you have all these different studies, independent studies from different parts of the world, living in denial shouldn't be an option. Because we can't have a future with everybody living in denial. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Because that's the best way to poison everybody. Right? It is, isn't it? Ingenious. Thyroid cancers, by the way, last your entire life. And the best way to get thyroid or cancer or heart, liver, lung problems is eat food from within 100 miles of a nuclear disease factory. Imagine the poor victims living in that community right there. Imagine, so instead of looking for cancer, they should be doing studies on heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia. And the first studies they do is autism and Down syndrome after an accident. But as soon as these places take fuel out of the reactor and put it in the pool, they should be doing studies on autism and Down syndrome. Many other health issues, by the way. Obesity doubled in Japan in the first year, which is emblematic of radioactive brain damage because of the pituitary gland, right? Radiation in small doses could actually be disproportionately worse. Great. And doses spread out over time might be more dangerous than doses given all at once. Not might be, that's absolutely unequivocally true. So eating food from within 100 miles of a nuclear disease factory regularly is the best way to bioaccumulate it, because it's permanent. It never goes away. It's in your body, pulsing energy every second. And as you eat more food and bioaccumulate more, you're producing so much white blood cells that you're dysfunctional. And it might manifest as schizophrenia because you're producing a complete lack of oxygen because you have so many white blood cells. So the red blood cells carry oxygen and nutrition, like oxygen. So when you produce more white blood cells than red blood cells, your oxygen level gets down to 17, 18, or 19%, say, and you need 21% to be functional. Well, when you lose a percent because of the high increase of white blood cell, you're impaired, you're intoxicated. And that's what alcohol does, right? Alcohol displaces your red blood cells. And smoking does the same thing. It displaces your red blood cells. And so you become intoxicated, but particularly alcohol. That's how you get intoxicated, is you displaced your white blood cells, your red blood cells. And that's what makes you feel intoxicated. My apologies. Officials sharply raised the radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after the meltdown, 75 times higher than the World Health Organization recommended for children, and they got the worst numbers conceivable. They're the scariest numbers. So to raise it 75 times higher, How did we get this lost? How did we lose our way so much? This was the NOAA's model. This is based on cesium-137 iodine-131. The model is based on 40 days cycle, and it's not based on nuclear meltdowns and fuel pools melting down. It's based on a fraction of a percent of what was actually lost. And it doesn't include the plutonium and their daughters, the neptunium and their daughters, the strontium and their daughters. But you would extrapolate that if you were an academic, but if not, you wouldn't know about it, right? You wouldn't be able to. Why is every nuclear power plant, except for a few, surrounded by farms? Because that's the best way to murder us and poison us. And what else would make sense, I wonder? Is it a coincidence that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms? And that they know that the farm is going to suck up the radiation? There's just a ridiculous amount to study. And so clearly they know. They really do. So they like to say Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear accident, but how can Chernobyl be the world's worst nuclear accident when Fukushima, each reactor at Fukushima is 800 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. They're massive reactors. Not counting the fuel pools, where there's 8 more reactors in each building. And that was lost. So a couple of years ago, in 2020, there was millions. This was the original headlines, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. It was millions, actually. See a massive migratory bird death. This was quite interesting because it was 194 species, and they were all insect eaters. So you got 194 species, different species, dropping dead in mass in the migratory route. And the reason they were dropping dead because they were extremely emaciated. There was no insects to eat. And they have no fat reserves, barely any muscle mass, and they were flying until they couldn't fly anymore. So you had 194 species of insect-eating birds on a migratory route. So when 195 specialists in eating insects can't find it and show up emaciated, it's time to start questioning an industry that has never ever been held to account. Fukushima is the deepwater horizon of nuclear accidents. April 11, 2011. The deepwater horizon. That was a really interesting way to frame that. It's completely dishonest to suggest it that way. It's the equivalent of a meteorite hitting the planet, but except the effects play out in slow motion over several decades. But the result is always the same. Last week I came across a well-written piece in Slog, the Stranger's blog, by Goldie about the Fukushima reactors. The writer admitted they succumbed in the early stages to peer pressure and a basic understanding of the science to reassure readers that Fukushima was not Chernobyl. And Goldie writes, like last year's Gulf spill, corporate government incompetency and misinformation has made the severity of the Fukushima leak impossible for the public to measure. And likewise, Japanese government officials are now admitting that the release of the radioactive materials may too continue for months. Well, it goes on forever. long past the human experience. This stuff never goes away, and it never stops hemorrhaging out. At Chernobyl, the worst was over in days, and lasted. A graphite, which is different than uranium plutonium like Fukushima. It's brutal, but it's not as terrible as Fukushima in any sense of the word. But they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, because it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, not like walking in the sunshine. And fires were extinguished within 2 weeks. As far as I know, Chernobyl's still melting down to the earth, so still hemorrhaging radiation. Compared to Fukushima, the initial releases of radioactive materials was immense. The fallout setting off radiation alarms 680 miles away in Sweden, with a half-life of 8 days, the threat from iodine. The radioactive contaminant with the most immediate health impact dissipated quickly. This is absurd. Again, this is an absurd lie to suggest that the main threat was iodine-131. Because there's 1,000 fission products comes from the meltdown. The biggest byproduct, by the way, is the curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And the plutonium isotopes, we showed you the studies last night, killed all the dogs in all the experiments of multiple cancers, multiple tumors, mostly skeleton tumors, which is a brutal way to die. So these are really dishonest people that, when they come out and talk about iodine-131 as the holy grail of a nuclear meltdown, it's not illegal to lie to you, right? It's not illegal to lie about nuclear. It's not a crime to poison you with radiation either. Officials pumping radioactive water into the sea. Well, you can't put it in tanks. If you fill up a tank with the radiation we're talking about, you can't get back on the site. They have to dump everything into the ocean or they lose control of the site right away. And those at the site are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. And there were 16,000 of them quit in just a short period. Well, just hang on a second. Let me bring up that headline one more time for you. I'm not going to last much longer. I'm pretty busted up. I'll be back to my old self hopefully tomorrow night. The whole world at some point is going to wake up. I got to go shake every friggin' one of them myself. They are going to wake up at some point. November the 5th, 2012. 16,000 workers quit. Fukushima radiation is still circling the globe, 2012. The levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle. And this is a pretty despicable journalist. Well, I mean, the journalist's job is to sell you the crazies version, right? The public relations firms. Japan's nuclear disaster was put on par with Chernobyl. Well, that's nice of you. May I have another? Fukushima was 4 reactors, not 1. Fukushima had 32 reactor cores at the top of the 4 buildings. Chernobyl had none. So Fukushima lost 36 reactor cores. Each one of them was equal to 800 Chernobyls. Because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium, except for Medusa, which was a hideous concoction of reclaimed uranium plutonium. It's hideous to have that thing on our planet. That technology should never, under any circumstances, be allowed on this planet. And we didn't get a date on that story, did we? My apologies. Japan decided to raise the assessment of the accident that crippled Fukushima crippled. I mean, look at these buildings. They're not crippled. They're completely gone. Putting on par with Chernobyl, the Jap nuclear industry said on Tuesday. Oh yeah, April 11th. So by April 11th, they were aware these buildings were completely lost. The entire inventories were lost. Let me give you a picture of what the first couple of weeks would have looked like. Here we go. So the first couple of weeks, everybody's seen this picture. Every academic, before that story came out on the 11th, the 1 month anniversary, on day 6, this is what it would have looked like for Reactor 3 and 4, for instance. And Reactor 1 and 2 is completely destroyed, but it doesn't look quite as bad as this, right? And so they take advantage of your lack of knowledge, right? Because you've been bombarded from birth with all kinds of propaganda from the nuclear industry. The Secrecy Act in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s never went away. So the Manhattan Project, where there had a couple of 100,000 people working on a nuclear weapon, and they managed to contain no one knew about it until Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And everybody was like, what? What's an atomic bomb? And that ushered in the beginning of the end for humanity and the 8 million species because of the radioactive fallout that is perpetually unleashed on this planet. The decision to raise the alert level to 7 from a 5 on the scale amounts to an admission of the accident at the nuclear facility. So you got the journalist whose job is to make you happy and make you smile and everything else. And then they allegedly interview it, but it doesn't really work that way. The academic writes the story. They send it to the journalists who built up a following by being an employee of a media that is an expert at doing that. And then she makes cat videos and everything. And then they sell. She puts her name on it. Hey, hang on, we got someone calling in. Hello, you're live.
Hi, Dan. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I heard you just say that you were getting ready to wind down your show tonight. And I wanted to, I apologize for interrupting you, but
no, it's okay. It's okay. Go ahead.
I'll keep it short and sweet. But something that really caught my eye a little while ago was that and it's something you could see on Wikipedia in its basic form, but you know that I'm from Ottawa, and so I live within about 230 kilometers from Chalk River, which was the host of Canada's first
nuclear meltdown. Yeah.
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 Exactly,
you actually had 2 meltdowns there.
Oh, did they have 2?
Yeah, they had 2. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
And then they got 1 million tons buried on site, and it's right alongside the Ottawa River, runs right down to you, right?
Exactly, and I was going to mention that as you speak about how reactors are built so close to water sources that give so many people fresh water to drink, and it's always seemed odd to me. But what I want to keep it short and sweet, sir, because I know you have a good show going on.
No, that's good.
But in 2023, in May, this really disturbed me. That they have continued to extend the Chalk River facility, nuclear facilities. And they gave all kinds of excuses, isotopes for medical purposes,
that's right,
etc.
Yeah, that's right.
But they announced that they were going to start the world's first micro-modular reactor.
Yeah, I covered that. That's right. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Okay, I guess I missed that. I've been busy working.
Yeah,
but
no worries.
But to your average listener, you could read about it on Wikipedia, but you could dig a little further and read more about the horrendous possibilities that could come from this. And what blows my mind, honestly, Dana,
Yeah.
is that they want to make these things the size a little bit larger than a shipping container.
Yeah.
And this is the part that not only blows my mind, but makes me actually question what is wrong with humanity. They want to build these devices at Chalk River Laboratories, and they want to transport them to remote northern communities.
Yeah.
Where they are going to replace existing diesel generator infrastructure. And their only reasoning that all that I've dug into is the saving of millions and millions, hundreds of millions of liters of fuel, diesel fuel. But I asked the question, I'm sorry for stuttering, but
No, that's great. Go ahead.
why on earth would you choose remote northern communities in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Northern Ontario, Northern Quebec, Newfoundland? Why are you choosing northern communities to test these things? Well, I have an obvious answer, is they want to test it on low population areas before they start bombarding the high population areas that are closer to the United States border.
A controlled population that is kept in that little tiny area all the time, right? And so everything there is track, trace, and database because there's so few populations, right? But there's another side of that also that seems realistic. Is they're looking at a nuclear war, and they can't really have a full-on nuclear war unless they got somewhere they can go for shelter. And so these so-called small modular reactors are always like when you push a topic like this, when you look throughout history, you'll see that it's never for the application; it's for something else. And so I'm assuming that they can't have their full planet murder genocide nuclear war without the small modular reactors to sustain them in their habitats, right? While everything is dying off. That's just my opinion, right? Because first off, these places have catastrophic weather conditions where the time we're putting them, and they can't guarantee anything with a reactor. We have nothing to contain the meltdown. The list is very long. And what's interesting about that is they putting it up in the Yukons and places like that, and the remote mining communities is not going to work because they need a lot of water, and they need a power source to run these things. They can't run on their own power. So when they talk about it'll save millions of liters and gallons, it's simply not true because they still need the power source. They need an enormous amount of energy to run these sites. Even small modular reactors are typically 1/3 of a large reactor, so they're going to need 300,000 gallons a minute or so. And these communities don't have those resources. See? So it's not going to be for that particular application, but it's meant because these are going to be, the minerals are going to be mined up there and stuff like that. It's social engineering on a scale that most of us can't comprehend. I didn't mean to cut you off, John, but go ahead.
No, sir, you didn't. I agree with you. I agree with the premise there. And of course, as everyone listening understands, that these whether it's a large nuclear facility, a power facility, or whether it's one of these new micro modular reactors, they do require external power to operate, and of course
enormous amount of power. Yeah.
They do require water, but what I found most insidious was they're going to test it in northern communities. Now, let me ask you a very simple question. Who are the majority of I'm talking about Canada here, who are the majority of Canadians that live in northern communities?
Government.
Well, no.
There's a lot. Well, it depends.
I was thinking Indigenous.
Yeah,
people.
well, 100%. Yeah.
First Nations people are the majority, and it just shows
they hate the natives, right?
Yes, exactly.
Worldwide, they hate them, man.
The disgust that they have. At least that's how I see it.
No, 100%. You're 100% right thinking that.
These people that we should be assisting with fresh water and education and proper industries. Anyway, I digress. But it bothers me very much that they want to test these things. Why
in the native community?
Ottawa? How about that? Or how about Toronto? How
Right,
about Halifax?
Why are these isolated little communities full of natives? Because that's what they've always done, right?
It's disgusting to me. And so I'm sorry to interrupt your show, but
they're setting the stage for some kind of scenario down the road, right? So if you do, like, the problem is there's 100 designs, 140 something designs for the so-called small modular reactor, but and so that tells you they don't have a solution, right? Because none of them broken through, and the only one that got an application into the regulatory commission went bankrupt and stole all the investors' money. And what the hell was their name?
Was that SNC Lavalin?
No, that was. What the hell was their name? I know it. I got no excuse for not knowing the name, but because the last 2 weeks I've been doing legacy news cycles, and so I gotten away from the news cycle for a few weeks. My brain went and gave up the ghost on me.
That's understandable, Dana, and regardless of the company that we're both trying to think of, it still is, and I'm going to leave you with this. It's disgraceful that they want to test these really far-fetched, elementary and primary facilities, these, as they call them, micro-modular reactor, which sounds really to the average person in the public. They think, oh, that sounds good. Hey, great idea.
Oh, yeah.
They're testing it in places where fresh water flows from the north to the south based on if everyone accepts the way the earth moves, the way it's designed. Fresh water flows from the north to the south. I mean, I don't understand what they're doing with this, hurting these small communities that are already hurting, and then potentially poisoning water with.
They're fixated on it. They're fixated on poisoning water and the natives.
They'll eventually flow into Hudson's Bay and flow, downward. Eventually hit the Great Lakes and all the beautiful rivers and streams that we have that come off of these northern waters. But as far as the people, I mean, it's like they're spitting in Canadians' faces and saying we're going to test these in northern communities. Well, I excuse me, I have trouble with that because it's easier to operate facilities in communities that have moderate weather. Why would you go to a place that suffers minus 40 degrees centigrade temperatures regularly throughout the winter? Why would you be testing there if no other reason than you consider these people expendable? And that bothers me a great deal because it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, it's true.
So I'll let you go, Dana.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, good stuff, man.
Bye.
Thanks for the call.
Bye for now.
Yeah, bye-bye. And so the micro reactors, they're talking about 50, 60 megawatts. A megawatt typically powers 1,000 homes. And so, say 60 megawatt will power 40,000 homes, say, right? Or 60,000, who knows? But say 40,000. And, we cover stories, we've covered this nonstop for 5 years, basically, the micro-reactor fable. And there's only one corporation with an application into the regulatory agency, not the full application or nothing like that. And then they got kind of a rubber stamp for a license, but they never come to fruition. And the rest of them, there's 100 major companies. There's about 140 something designs. I think because it's clear this is not manifesting, it's not going to show up, and in any time in our lifespan, by the looks of it, geothermal is ready to go, it's good to go, and many other this year will be 660 gigawatts of just solar power. That's equal to 600. That's equal to over 700 large nuclear reactors coming online in 12 months. There's currently 400 worldwide, and that's 365 gigawatts of nuclear worldwide. I think the small modular reactor, I know we covered a story 5 years ago or something, and it got a lot of traction for a few weeks, and that's the same with a lot of this stuff. Right then it kind of goes away. We covered a story of how they were going to put a micro reactor at truck stops every 5 miles across Canada and the United States. And of course, this is ludicrous because all you need is one drunk transport truck driver to run into one of those things. And that'll be the end of the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry can't survive another nuclear event, right? They simply can't do it. And so this year, there's about 2 gigawatts coming online, but there was around 5 gigawatts went offline in nuclear. So nuclear still went backwards about 3 gigawatts this year. There is no nuclear renaissance. There's a lot of posturing out there, but it's simply not true. And there was 660 gigawatts of solar this year. And the year's not over. So these are incredible numbers, absurd numbers. And there was an estimate between 2020 and 2026 that there was going to be 4,800 gigawatts of renewables coming online in just 6 years, which is equal to all gas, oil, and coal plants worldwide combined. And nuclear is only equal to 360 gigawatts. So it's not hard to imagine that this is coming to fruition. That you had over the last few years, because of Ukraine and Russia and many other facets, the price of all commodities have risen dramatically. Like the price of gyprock or the price of copper or steel or iron or whatever. Everything has gone skyrocketed, right? Which made the installation of renewables much more expensive. Like 27% more expensive. Just in the last couple of years due to the artificial inflation of commodities worldwide. It was artificial inflation, right? And as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, I came out with a video and talked about that. Go fill your cars up before it hits the fan here. Because everything's going to skyrocket right away. And so I don't see personally the small modular reactor showing up. Because anything small modular reactors can do, geothermal can do much quicker. It can do that year rather than 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And it can do it much better for much longer with no adverse side effects and no ecological harm. And every facet of the site can be recycled into the next geothermal plant. And all you're doing is digging a hole, right? It's completely benign to the environment in the context of the commodity, the gas, oil, coal, nuclear disease factories. But I think what it is they're trying to make themselves relevant. And They got 80 years to come up with a small modular reactor. They still haven't managed to accomplish it. And despite all the push and all the insane scams to get people to invest in the small modular reactor industry, there is no like, because if you build a small modular reactor, you can't do it for power. You got to build it on one of the national laboratory sites. And then it's going to take, you got to run it for 10 years to find out any flaws. And then you're going to find all kinds of flaws. Now you got to redesign everything, submit all that right back into the regulatory. First off, you got to submit an application to the regulatory agency. You're talking about 1 million pieces of paper. They're going to have to hire 300,000 or 400,000 staff, and it's going to take them 3 or 4 years to get through that. The engineers are going to say you got to change this. So then they're going to re-engineer it, and all of that stuff's going to go back to the regulatory agency once that's done. So you're talking 5, 6, 7 years down the road before the application moves into a licensing process. The licensing process could take 2 or 3 more years. That's 10 years. So now they say, okay, you can build an experimental reactor at, say, Los Alamos National Laboratory or Savannah River, whatever. And so now you work out a deal, which won't be hard with them guys, but it still takes time. Now you got to allocate the money, the investors. You got to build a model. You got to have a company come in and build it. The construction of these facilities are notoriously problematic, and everything is triply inspected. And so you finally build this thing. Now you got to run it for 10 years. So now we're talking 25 to 30 years down the road. Once you get, a decade of running the reactor, this is the typical licensing process. Then you re-engineer everything. You submit that to the nuclear regulatory agencies. They submit it back with the new schematics. And now you got to build another reactor. Make sure that one doesn't screw up on you. And if you can run that through 5 or 7 years with no issues, now you might get an application into the regulatory agency to mass produce it. So now you're talking 40 years down the road. And even though they want to fast track this and they're going to fast track that, every piece of scrap that goes on a nuclear site is triply inspected by 3 different teams of inspectors. And so all the equipment has to be the best of the best, which is very hard to source. And then you have to inspect everything multiple times, which is it's a very monetary consuming, time consuming, resource intensive. And so meanwhile, this year in a 12-month period was 660 gigawatts of solar came online. So nuclear is trying to look as relevant as it can in desperation. That's the dying cries of an industry that shouldn't exist. See? The small modular reactor. I can't believe I still can't remember the name of the company that I was talking about. The only one with an application to the regulatory agency. Let me check the comments section here, see if anybody jumped the gun up for me. Okay, I don't see it. And okay, well, I don't see it. I apologize. I've been off my game all week. I haven't stopped. And well, I didn't think I'd get this far in the video tonight. I'm pretty freaking burnt out. I apologize. We're just going to call it a night right here. I can't remember the name of that nuclear company with the small modular reactor application that made it into the stocks and stuff and then robbed all the stock. And that blows my mind because we cover it so much every year that I can't. It just shows you, right, how the brain works. Let's call. Well, give me a second here. Let me get rid of all this we got through. I thought it was really important we come out and talk about the farms tonight. And so we did. Oh, we're almost ready here. So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Does nuclear industry build all nuclear plants in prime farming zones to destroy the health of people worldwide? Well, it sure seems that way, don't it? I mean, this is satellite pictures. It's hard to appreciate what we're talking about here, but it's it's pretty crazy. So thank you, everybody, that participated in the votes tonight. Does nuclear industry build all nuclear power plants in prime farming zones to destroy the health of people worldwide? They've been doing it for 80 years, so yeah, that's exactly what's going on. We'll see everybody. Yeah, new scale. Thank you, James. Excellent. I thought I was losing my mind. I couldn't remember the name. Can't believe I forgot the name. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Dana. Thanks, Dana. Good night, everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. This is Wednesday. We're getting through the week. My goodness, this week we got I shouldn't complain because when I look at what the hurricane done to the United States, it's just, I don't think anything we're going to get down here is going to come close to that nightmare. But we're supposed to get 100 millimeters of rain starting Thursday. It's going to be a lot of rain. And I just had a leak in my kitchen from the roof. And I went up on the roof a few days ago and I found a shingle that got loose. I put a couple of bricks on it just to weigh it back down. And we had some more rain and no more rain got through. And I was like, I got to get some cement, some shingle cement now and put underneath it. Well, that was quite the shock to the system. I was playing guitar, right? I sat there playing guitar, and I was doing a Johnny Cash song, Johnny Cash. I was doing "You Are My Sunshine." I was doing the picking for that one. I got it almost perfect too. All the harmonics and everything. It's a real pretty little song. And all of a sudden I heard water, and I looked up and I was like, "Oh shit, what's going on?" Water coming out of my kitchen. But it was just a single shingle that got loose. Freaking crows years ago probably done it. Okay, so we're going to call it a night. See everybody tomorrow. You have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the next show. And we're going to play another one of... James got a bunch of songs up on his website, James Lucid. You see him in the comment section tonight, for instance, and most nights. And this is one of his first songs, and Calm Down Charlie's called, who was a notorious troll, still is around here from Japan. He's been stalking me for over 10 years straight. And James put out this song, and Calm Down Charlie literally lost his mind. He called in the next night. It was savage. He lost his mind. It was hilarious. And he's such a degenerate, disgusting, parasitic, excuse for a human, that I'm able to see past that and enjoy this song. So I hope you do too. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams, Chicago division fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford's show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.